Awesome. I had to do all the buttons. All right, I'm Paige, I'm an alcoholic. And yeah, remembering where we are is really helped by me recording them because I can go back and listen to when I forget. But where we're going to pick up is on page 46. And we're right at the middle of the page where it says, yes, we have agnostic temperament. And just to sort of contextualize when it's saying yes, what are we saying yes to? And what we were really diving into last week was some of the barriers that many of us come to Alcoholics Anonymous with. Barriers to belief in a power greater than ourselves. And we spoke about things like, man, maybe I had religion shoved down my throat. Maybe I was sent to Sunday school and I was given the sort of Santa Claus idea of God, and that didn't feel like enough. Maybe I saw people do terrible things in the name of religion. Maybe I saw the hypocrisy that certain religious people had. Maybe I had religious trauma or life trauma and saw the pain and suffering of so many people and thought, man, if there was a God, where's God and all of that? And then it spoke about. So we had those experiences, yes, but then it spoke about what opens us up. And it was talking about when enchanted by a starlit night. So our experiences of awe and wonder that open us up to the belief that there could be a power greater than ourselves. And the most common experience, and it might not be full awe and wonder, although those are powerful moments. But often what opens us up to the belief that there could be a power greater than ourselves is another alcoholic. One who is sober, who is happy, and they've got like joy. Weird. I was nowhere near joy when I got here. You know what I'm saying? I was miserable. But those happy, sober alcoholics who drank the way that I drank, who felt the way that I felt, who know what it's like to say, that's it, never again, only to find themselves doing it again. That is what opens us up. The experiences that we've had. And the thrust of what we're talking about is I can be held back by belief, opinions, ideas. But what opens me up to the idea that there could be a power is experience. And so that's what's diving us into this paragraph. Yes, we of agnostic temperament. And again, the root of the word agnostic, it's Greek. And ag is without, and gnosis means knowledge. And again, we're not talking about that intellectual, yeah, I know. You know that thing that we give our sponsor when they're like, hey, you should really work on your inventory. Yeah, I know. You really need to make that amends. Yeah, I know. You know, it's not that, yeah, I know. It's a heart level experiential knowing. And we are not expected to have a heart level experiential knowing at step 2. That is why it is we agnostics, not to the agnostics. We're the agnostic afterwards, you know. It is we agnostics when we all come to the second step. We might not have belief. We might have belief. We might not have religion. We might hate religion. We might have religion. And we might have had those moments of experience, but we haven't had that deep and profound experience, that change within the core of who I am. And that is why we agnostics. So yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. That idea that barriers to belief in God are nothing new. And it says, let us make haste to reassure you. Like we quickly want to let you know it is okay. We've been there too. And it said we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice. Now that word prejudice, what that word means is to have old ideas or opinions about an experience I've not yet have. Prejudice, prejudge. I'm prejudging. I am sure that this thing could not work for me. Well, have you done it? No, but I'm convinced it won't work. That's what we're talking about. And so what we're asked to do in the second step is to do our best to lay that aside and express even a willingness to believe in a capital P power greater than ourselves. Now I'm going to point out all these capitalizations because when we talk about capitalizations, what we're talking about is words that are pointing to God or synonyms for God or words that we could use instead of that word God. Capital P power. That's what we're talking about. And all that is asked is that even a willingness. Could there possibly be a power greater than myself? Keep in mind, we did step 1 2 weeks ago. Well, a couple weeks ago, but like we're in it 2 weeks ago. And I just admit alcoholism was a power greater than myself. You know what I mean? Like, hey, there's got to be another. We already got one, And it says, we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. So we began to get results with simply this idea, there could be a power greater than myself. Even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. And one of the things that I believed was a barrier to the second step is I thought I was supposed to know what God was. I thought I was supposed to have walking hand in hand on the beach with God. Keep in mind, I'm in Alberta. This is a landlocked province. We don't got beaches. Do you know what I mean? That's not happening. And I didn't have those experiences. And especially at the second step, I'm not being asked to define it, and I'm not being asked to comprehend, which is to say to understand. And if you were here last week, I'm sure I went on this dictionary tangent. I'm just dictionary corner over here, just jazzercised about the 1930s dictionary. And I've got a copy of a 1930s dictionary. And I looked up the word understand. And one of the definitions of the word understand is to know through experience. And at the second step, I am not going to know this power through experience. So I'm not going to understand this power at step 2. But I'm going to begin to have experiences with this power as I write inventory, as I do a 5th step, as I take a quiet hour, as I do my 6 and 7, as I go and make amends. Ooh, if you want some experiences with power, you go make amends. You'll have experience galore. And so that is how I am building that understanding. I don't have to figure it out. I couldn't possibly figure it out in my mind. And actually, last week I also spoke about the metaphor of the spiritual journey, being like Tinder. Do you know what I mean? It's like, we don't even got to super like this power. I think we just got to swipe right. I think that's the direction you swipe. I'm not an expert, but it's that idea. Now, I'm sure nobody here has ever done this thing, and none of you can relate to this. But do you know when you see an attractive person that you want to get into a relationship with, and then you cultivate the relationship in your mind, and you haven't even planned the wedding. You're already planning the divorce, right? He took half my things. That jerk. You know what I mean? I'm visualizing all of that. And you know how that doesn't actually create a relationship? It's just like that in step 2. I think I got to figure it out in my mind. But in our mind is not where a relationship really exists. I mean, I'll get hurt by the things that I created in my mind in that fake relationship. But a relationship exists through experience. So that's what we're talking about. And it says, much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Oh, goodness, that's good news. If you're like, Paige, you're a little weird. I don't want to consider your higher power. You don't have to. Or keep in mind, says we don't need to. But if you're if you need to borrow a higher power, if you need to borrow a God just as a starting place, goodness, borrow mine. Mine loves you so effing much. So effing much. You know what I mean? Just wants the best for you. Loves you so much. So you can borrow mine if you want. But you don't have to. You don't need to even consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate. And that is so helpful. Because the belief, the idea, what I could come up with in my mind at step 2 felt so grossly inadequate. It just felt like it wasn't enough. Do you know what I mean? I thought I was supposed to have the spiritual experience on step 2. And that just wasn't happening. I don't need to consider another's. The conception that I have that maybe there could be a power that I don't understand, that I can't really wrap my head around, is good enough. Step 2 is not the finish line. Step 2 is the starting blocks of a lifelong race. And it says, as soon, so our own conception, however inadequate, however not enough it feels, was sufficient to make the approach, the start, not the finish, the start, and affect a contact with him. And that's what I'm after. I'm after conscious contact. And I spoke about this last week, but I got to speak about it again. The word conscious, as in conscious contact, is Latin in origin. So a completely different language. But the word conscience, when we break it down, con means with, and shus, which is sire, means knowing. So it's step 2, I am without knowing. But when I get to step 11, when I'm building that conscious contact, what am I doing? I have that with knowing. And how do I go from without to with? Well, it is the actions of the 12 steps that build that experience. And I just got to start with the belief there could be a power. That's where I'm starting to create that beginning of that conscious contact, to begin a contact with this power. I've got to be willing to think there could be one to set it off, to start this thing. And it says, as soon as we admitted the possible, like this is not even as soon as I believe that there is God and this is what God, no. As soon as I admit the possible existence, man, some of you who know me, like especially in person, the bar for entry, I'm not having to do like hurdles or that high jump they do with the pole. Like the bar for entry is wheelchair accessible. It's just a little boop, you know what I mean? And that, some of you get why that's especially funny for me. But it's wheelchair accessible. I could do it, And so as soon as we admitted the possible existence of a capital C, capital I, creative intelligence, a capital S, capital U, a spirit of the universe underlining the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. And some of you guys know I love my sneaky prayers, I love my sneaky promises, and I love my sneaky description of a spiritual awakening. And guess what? We just had one. So when it talks about being possessed of a new sense of power and direction, and welcome, we're on the bottom of page 46. When it talks about being possessed of a new sense of power and direction, that is a synonym or a description of the spiritual awakening. And if you're like, girl, are you sure? Are you sure you're not making things up? Here is how I know. Because that is the result after it says, provided we took other simple steps. What are those simple steps? The 12 steps. That's what we're talking about. We are talking about these 12 steps as a way of life. And the result of these 12 steps is a way of life. I start with there could be a power, and then I make a decision. I write inventory, 5th step, go and do 6 and 7, 8 and 9. Keep it rocking and rolling, 10, 11, 12. If I do that, the result of that is a new sense of power and direction. It's that sneaky description of a spiritual awakening. And there will be more. All right. And it says, we found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. And what is asked of me is to seek God. There's somebody I know that describes it as God's a gentleman. Like you've got to invite God in. And I was like, aren't those the same rules for vampires? Vampire can't come in unless you invite him. And then I was told, yep, bottom of page 46. So glad you're here, Karen. I was told, no, but stop helping, Paige. Stop helping. But it's that idea, like I've got to invite God. I've got to seek this power. And so we read that and it's like, oh girl, how do I seek this power? Do I got to go hang out on a mountaintop? Like, do I got to join a monastery? I'll be honest, I could probably use the peace and quiet I'm assuming that they have in monasteries, Do I need to join? You know what I mean? Do I gotta get into yoga? Only if you want. How do I seek this power? How we seek this power is through the tangible actions of the 12 steps. That's how I do it. It's that simple. But you can do yoga if you want. I'm not restricted anyone. So here's how you know I'm not. It says, to us, the capital R, capital S, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. So to do it in earnest is sincerely. And again, seek, that is my responsibility. I've got to seek this power. And how I do that is through these 12 steps. Again, that's the purpose, is to seek this power through the 12 steps. And it says, it is open, we believe, to all men. And I know we got a lot of ladies. It's open to us too. It's open to all people. And I will point something out. I like to say this. The 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are alcoholic proof. They have to be, because they are for alcoholics. And that might be a bit of a revelation, but man, I thought, I was pretty sure I could mess this up. Do you know what I mean? But if I follow the directions as outlined in this book to the best of my ability, if I am sincere, if I am thorough, and I'm moving on this thing on a daily basis, it's alcoholic proof. It's gotta be. Look, I'm sober, If I can do it, and I don't mean I just mean I'm a silly little drunk. If this silly little drunk could stay sober, heck, we can all work these steps. It's available to us all, So it says, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. So when we see the word God in this book, when you hear me use the word God in this book, what I mean is the conception of a power greater than yourself that you are the most open to. This is the book meeting us where we're at. And it says this applies too to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. The book is allowing us to ask ourselves what it means to us. Do not let any prejudice, so I'm going to prejudge, any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. And you know what? This is my experience. The one spiritual term that I feel like has more prejudice than anything else, meditation. You know why I think that? Now, this is my opinion. You feel free to disregard it. You know why I think that? Is because whenever we talk about meditation, what is the first thing that almost everyone says? Oh, no, I can't meditate. I just can't sit still, right? Some of you are like, girl, don't call me out. Rude. Because we think meditation is sitting in perfect stillness. And that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. You know why? Because the brain is an organ, and the brain, as an organ, has a job. And part of its job is to think. Just like my heart is to beat and my kidneys do whatever they do. Probably not great, because sometimes I have kidney pain. Sorry, that's an aside. Why does my back hurt? I don't drink enough water. That's why. But its job is to think. And so we think that if we can't sit in perfect stillness, we can't meditate. And that's not the case. Let's have a new experience with this word. Meditation is like going to the gym. If I don't have resistance, I can't get strong. And so meditation is not perfect stillness. Meditation is bringing our attention to a single point, whether that be breath, whether, as the Oxford group did, they would bring their attention to openness and receptivity for spiritual guidance, being open to the presence of God. Whether it's that or breath work or a mantra or you're listening to a guided meditation, I bring my attention to that. And then, and this is going to be a surprise to nobody that knows me, my mind wanders, shock and awe. And we notice and we bring it back. And that is the practice of meditation. So a way to reframe meditation is not sitting in perfect stillness. Meditation is bringing my attention to a point, my mind wandering, I notice and I bring it back. which is to say I can't meditate if my mind doesn't wander. Does that not reframe the whole practice? And some of you are going to be really annoyed because you're like, oh, that means I can try meditating. I'm the worst. I'm the worst. And so that's what we get to do. We get to ask ourselves what it means to us, and we get to lay aside our old beliefs about these things. And it says at the start. And step 2 is very simply the start. It is not the finish line. At the start, this was all we needed to commence. And again, commence is to begin. We're just starting. This isn't the finish line. Commence spiritual growth. And spiritual growth is the name of the game in Alcoholics Anonymous. Oftentimes we hear, oh, it's progress, not perfection. But some of y'all know I'm pedantic. I'm pedantic with purpose. I got 3 hills that I die on. And one of the hills is that it is not progress, not perfection. It is spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. I don't go around correcting people. That's too pedantic. And that's very antisocial. I'm not like, actually. But I point that out because so often I think I'm progressing in life and my life progression will keep me sober. You know, oh, I got the car, I got the job, I got the relationship, I got the fancy new whatever it is. But we know from our own experience that can't keep us sober. That cannot keep us sober. It is spiritual growth. How am I progressing spiritually? That's what matters. So, to commence, to begin spiritual growth, to affect our first conscious, with knowing, relation with God. And again, I'm really big on that relational view. And part of the reason I'm big on that relational view, and I know I would have spoken about this last week, but for those of you who are in a relationship, for those of you that are married, you stop talking to your spouse for a week. See how connected you'll feel. You know what I'm saying? Just don't talk to your spouse. You stop listening to your spouse. That's a whole other separate issue. Some of you guys go, what? I gotta listen? Yes. You stop listening to your spouse. You stop doing things together. You guys know when there's that argument, you have like an argument and there's that like unspoken wedge of silence of like, you know that there's that thing between you guys after, the fight's over, but you haven't quite made up like that. Man, if we got that stuff between us, we haven't spoken, we haven't listened to each other, we haven't done things together, we're not going to feel connected. And that's why I find the relational view very helpful. You don't have to find it helpful. If it doesn't resonate for you, don't use it. But it's that idea that I've got to continue to build upon a relationship that is going to grow and change over time. But I've got to put work into it like I would any other relationship. And so it says our first conscious relation with God as we understood him. Again, to understand is to know through experience. And that's step 2. I'm not going to have that experience. I build that through the steps. It says afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. Man, if you were to tell me, Paige, like, oh, I've got this like really interesting, cool spiritual book, I'm like, heck yeah, I'm in. Do you know what I mean? Or if you were to tell me, oh, I've been doing this really cool meditation practice, I'm like, heck yeah, I'm in. Or if you're like, I do yoga, I'm like, I'm not that flexible. But like I've become so open-minded. Whereas before it was just a start that, okay, maybe there could be a power. And that's all I need to start. And it says, so afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth. But if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So this, again, starting blocks. It says we used our own conception, however limited it was. It is okay if your belief, your conception that you have, welcome, we're on page 47. If it feels not enough, that's okay. It will grow. We just need to start. So it says, now this, if you're writing in your book, you can make a note that this is step 2, part 1. So it says, we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. And this is the question, and this is step 2, part 1. And I'm actually going to share it on the screen. Oh, I'm going to do it like that, and then share. Oh, that kind of puts me a little in the way. So step 2, part 1, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? That is it. It is that simple. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than me? And the reason I call this step 2, part 1, is because as step 2 is written on page 58 or on the wall or on the Zoom screen, we see it as came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. First and foremost, I need to believe that a power greater than myself exists. I want to point out, I don't got to believe in the power. I got to believe that there could be a power. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? That is as simple as it needs to be to get the ball rolling on step 2, part 1. And it goes on to say, as soon as a man can say he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. That is with emphasis. We put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, if you remember that movie. But with emphasis, because, you're on your way. That's enough. So if we can believe that, if we can answer, I believe there could be a power greater than myself, that's more than enough. It's accessible. It's got a ramp on it. You know what I mean? And from that ramp, we got to launch into a vigorous course of action. I didn't plan that metaphor. But truly, it is that simple. And if all our starting place is that I believe Paige believes, that is more than enough. If I believe, or Vivian, or I believe that, that person that comes with a light on in their eyes, a hope in their spirit, and they're happy. Those jerks, when you're newly sober, those are the jerks. Those happy jerks. That all I need to believe is that they have better things to do than lie about their experience. And if I'm willing to start there, that's it. That's it. That's the beginning. Step 2, part 1, that's it. And it says, as soon as a man can say he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way, not arrived. It has begun, it is not ended. And it says it has been repeatedly proven. So not a theory, not a belief, but our collective experience, that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. Now, the cornerstone is the stone that is symbolically laid upon which a building is built. And keep in mind, the effective spiritual structure that we get to build. Well, I need something effective because what I was bringing to the table was not working. I wasn't coming to Alcoholics Anonymous with nothing effective. But I need something effective, but deeper than that, like that wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. Now, I don't have to settle. Do you guys remember Winnie the Pooh, Eeyore? He lived in this like this shack of sticks. He'd have like these sticks that he'd line up and they would always fall down. Man, that's not the sort of spiritual structure I have to live in. These like sticks that keep falling down. We can build from this simple cornerstone. We can build. Now, I'm going to use religious imagery. So if this doesn't resonate, don't use it. But we can build a cathedral. Some of those amazing Gothic cathedrals with incredible, stained glass and art and architecture. Or if you've ever seen some of those incredible mosques that are just like breathtaking with their fine detail. That is what the spiritual structure of my spiritual life can be. And if you're like, I don't want it to look like that, it doesn't have to. It turns out I'm way more into architecture than I thought. I'm as surprised as you are. Yes, like Winchester Cathedral, you know what's up. Yeah, like I get to build something beautiful and something effective. But I need to start with there could be a power greater than myself. It's okay if I don't have the full image of what that cathedral is going to look like. Don't you worry, we got the blueprints, and those blueprints are the 12 steps. That'll take us. That's how we build it. We get to build something wonderful, truly wonderful. I don't got to settle for a little Eeyore shack, And Oh, you know what? Shoot, I forgot. So normally when it's got the asterisks to see the spiritual experience, I ignore it. And I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to do that. And then I get to this point and it says, please be sure. And I'm like, okay, since you asked me nicely, we'll pop over there. And the reason we're going to go there now is because this is the last asterisk. I was going to just keep on. And I'm like, oopsie doopsies, that is the final asterisk that takes us to the spiritual experience. Oopsie doopsies. So let's pop over to the spiritual experience appendix on page 567 of the book. Page 567, right at the end. I'm having a little bit of a pause so everyone can find it. Oh, and I'm going to have a sip of water while you do that. Look at me planning. Alrighty. So the spiritual experience appendix. So it says, the terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book. Now, when it talks about spiritual experience and spiritual awakening, for me, I just kind of use them interchangeably. Same, same diff, same thing. Now, but there are people who do differentiate and distinguish between the two of them. That's not a hill that I die on. You know the hills that I die on. But for some people, the experience is that like more sudden, more in the moment, like it happened. An awakening can be a little bit more of a gradual sort of situation. So that's a differentiation. So for example, somebody like Bill Wilson had an experience. Some other people have more of an awakening where it happens just a little bit more slowly. So the terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which, upon careful reading, shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself in many different forms. So spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, psychic change, we're talking about the exact same thing. And we're talking about this deep change in the core of who I am. And even though the manifestation, what it looks like for people is different, the solution is the same. The solution in Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience. So it says, yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences, pointing to the same thing, spiritual awakening, these personal or religious experience must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. So the sudden change where, how things are showing up internally and how they show up to life, suddenly it's a 180. And it says, happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. They're saying that's wrong. It doesn't have to be an immediate thing. Although, I will point out, it's really important. I do not sell the power of God short. I sell the power of Alcoholics Anonymous short. So it says in the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes were described. One of those we're going to see later on, we're going to see Fitzmayo have his "Who are you to say there is no God" experience. But we also spoke of Bill Wilson, who had his white light spiritual experience. Now we're going to talk as we read through about William James and his book, Varieties of Religious Experience. And in his book, it was actually a series of lectures that were recorded. He spoke about the spiritual experience of Bill Wilson's type, and they were known as experiences of the luminous variety, which is luminous phenomenon. So it was a thing that happened, and it's like you can see that it happened. So it says, though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness. So this immediate God knowing, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. And so keep in mind, as alcoholics, we do read things, and then we read into things that aren't there. But again, I will say, like, alcoholics doing that, I know it's a human thing, but, us, we would never. But that idea of, like, the elements are there. a God consciousness, a with knowing, and a vast change of feeling and outlook. That is what I'm after. But it's saying it might not happen in an instant. And it says, among our rapidly growing membership of thousands, no worries, I'm just glad you're here. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent. And I want to point that out. And because here's the thing, we're going to talk about the educational variety here in a second. But a lot of times I'll show up to in-person local meetings, and you kind of hear this thing where it's like, you can't expect to have an experience like Bill. I don't know anyone who's had an experience like that. We turn into Eeyores in our spiritual structures, a little Eeyore. I've lost my tail. The best I can hope for is the educational variety. And I really want to nonsense. One of my favorite sentences in the book, nonsense. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What I find happens more often than not in modern contemporary, where I live in the world, AA, is we take a long time working the steps. Months and months and months and months, It takes a year to get through the steps, and people describe having this, it's like it's gradual. But it happens gradually because we're doing it so slowly. I don't know about you guys, but I am not somebody that ever in my life was sipping an alcoholic beverage. Do you know what I mean? Here, bear with me with this. Do you guys know what it's like when you take a glass and you pour your alcohol into the glass? Now, I've lost some of you already. Some of you are like, nah, I don't got it. And then you put ice in the glass, and then you maybe have a little sip, and you set it down, and you socialize, and the ice begins to melt. Y'all know what that's like? Absolutely no, you don't. No, you don't. You know what it's like when you're out somewhere and somebody else is drinking that way. We peg that immediately, and we're like, what are you doing? Get after it. You know what I mean? And so if I were, which do not relate, never been able to, if I sip my drink, it'll take longer to get an effect. I'm a chugger sort of gal. Like a lady, pinkies up, but it's like that with this power. If I slowly wade in and I take my time and that exactly, Raymond, that is alcohol abuse. When the ice begins to melt, what are y'all doing? You know what I mean? It's rude. But that's how we often work the steps, is we take our time and, I don't want to, as an alcoholic, let's be real, I live my life by one rule, and one rule only. If it feels good, do it. Do all of it. Do it so much, so often it burns my life to the ground. The only exception to that rule appears to be step work. I don't want to overdo it. Can't overdo it with God. Do you know what I'm saying? And what happens is, if I work these steps with the same velocity and the same vigor that I drank, I will get a rapid effect. I have seen and worked with people who had very profound experiences as we're going through it quickly and thoroughly. So I find when people are being a little bit, oh no, I've lost my tail, it's because we're not doing it. Or maybe we did it and we stopped doing it, I'm off on a tangent and I can feel it coming, and I'm like, we're not stopping it. There's this thing, because we're in the spiritual infancy. And with babies, there's this thing that's known as object permanence. And with babies, very literal babies, if you play peekaboo with them, which I do, and I love it, and I'm here to win. I am peekaboo expert. I'll peekaboo all day. But part of why babies find peekaboo so interesting and enthralling and engaging is because if you cover their eyes, the world is gone. If you take their bottle or their toy and hide it behind something, it's gone forever. They don't realize that if they can't see the object, it doesn't exist. And oftentimes for those of us on the spiritual journey, we have not developed spiritual object permanence, which is to say, I do the work and I get this powerful experience. And then for one reason or another, I get a little complacent, or life happens, we stop doing the work. And then, isn't it wild how we start to get a little miserable? We start to get a little crunchy. The world's not doing things right. And we start to have all these problems. And even though the work worked when we were doing it, and even though we're not doing it right now, we are absolutely convinced that the work could not possibly help. We have object permanence. We don't see it immediately, it's gone. And that's a part of why it is so important that I remain consistent in this thing. Anywho, I haven't even gotten to the thing that, I'm way ahead on my tangents. Alrighty. So it says, it goes on to say, among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. So it happens, but it happens for everyone. Many of our experiences are what the psychologist William James called the educational variety. And so it's actually a really interesting thing. And this is what has got me to read varieties of religious experience more than once. But what got me to read it the first time was I was in a meeting and somebody messaged me and was like, did you know that the phrase educational variety or educational in relation to the experience does not exist in William James' Varieties of Spiritual Experience? And I was like, oh, you gotta get me on that. I gotta find it. And it's true. It's not used. The term educational variety. And if you're like, oh, what? A mistake in the spiritual experience appendix? Uh-oh, I've got some bad news for you if you're going to be heartbroken over that. We've got more mistakes. It's okay. We can make mistakes. Don't stress about it. But the phrase that it is used is gradual conversion. And if you want to find where that is specifically spoken about, it is in Lecture 10, because again, it was a series of lectures, so Chapter 10. But I want to point out when he talks about gradual conversions, he's talking about these conversions that happen over a few days or a few weeks. He's not talking about, I'm sober and miserable, I'm having an educational... That's not what he's talking about. So even the gradual conversions were happening relatively rapidly, a few weeks. Now, keep in mind, William James is just talking about spiritual awakenings. Alcoholics Anonymous does not exist yet. The Oxford group did not exist yet. He was just studying this phenomena because it was interesting to him. And he took a real intellectual view of it. And so it says... It says because they develop slowly over a period of time. So again, that period of time wasn't years. It was a couple weeks in the book, Varieties of Religious Experience. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. And in many cases, that is our experience. And it says, now these are the descriptions of a sneaky description of what a spiritual awakening looks like, as defined in the Spiritual Experience Appendix. So this is the first description. He finally realizes that he's gone a profound alteration, so a profound change in his reaction to life. So how I react to life is profoundly different. That's description number 1. Description number 2, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. I couldn't have done it on my own. Years and years and years of therapy and counseling and trying to be a good person, could not do it, did not do it. Now this is 3. What often takes place in a few months could have seldom been accomplished by years of self-discipline. So again, what happens relatively quickly, I couldn't have done it on my own. I was trying. And this is number 4. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource. So that God consciousness within, which they presently identify with their own conception of a capital P power greater than themselves. And what we're going to do is I'll keep reading and we'll go through, but or actually, you know what? I'm on the tangent now. We'll just do it now. So those are the 4 descriptions as offered by the chapter. But if you're interested, William James described 4 characteristics of a spiritual experience. And if you're looking for where that would be in his book, it is, I can't remember the number of the chapter, but it's on the chapter on mysticism. The mystical experience, which is to say spiritual experience. And mysticism, it's not woo-woo. It's about experience. It's about having an experience with this power. So that's what it's on about. So these 4 qualities of a spiritual experience, as described by William James, who's against, he didn't have a spiritual experience, he just found them fascinating. So the first description is that it is ineffable. And ineffable means not describable, something that needs to be experienced to be understood. And as we go through the chapter, we agnostics, what we're going to see is like, what the heck does a prosaic steel girder have to do with my alcoholism? What even is that? Why are we talking about electricity? Why are we talking about Galileo? Like, what the heck is why are we so heavy on the Wright brothers, right? Why are we talking about this? And the reason we're talking about it is because we're trying to describe something that is experiential. How would you describe to somebody the scent of a rose who had never smelt it? You would use metaphor and synonym. You know what I mean? And that's what the spiritual journey is like. It's like describing something that is indescribable, which is why we agnostics is so metaphor heavy. The other, there's 4 characteristics. The other is that it is noetic. What that means to be noetic is it reveals divine truths that I could not have otherwise known. Now, bear with me with this. Do you mean God's going to come down and give me the lotto numbers? No, but if you're worried about that, you might want to check out Gamblers Anonymous. I'm just kidding. But truly, divine truths that I could not otherwise know begin to be revealed. For example, a very practical example of that is when the mental obsession is removed and I do not want to drink and I'm able to say no to the first drink. Now that might not feel like, a divine truth, the spirit of the universe. But if you're like me, you know it's the spirit of the universe that's got to come down and get me to not do that, But that is something I could not otherwise know based on my experience. And I'm just going to share another example. And I'm going to talk about it in a real, personal way. One of the experiences that I had. And I remember one day I got a call from a sponsee, and she was just having this, she was having her own experience. She had this moment of gratitude. She had been in and out of AA for almost 30 years. And her husband, same deal, in and out of AA, almost 30 years. And for the first time, she was sober. Spiritual awakening, sober. And her husband was getting sober, and he was sober. And she calls me, and she was calling me with these tears of gratitude that this has happened in her life. And I'm somebody that's not naturally good at receiving compliments. But what came out of my mouth, and I promise you it was not me, but what came from me that was not me was I said, everything good in me is God. Everything good in me is God. That's not something I know. And when I'm talking about me, I'm like, on my own power, I'm not very nice to me. When I'm separated from this power, I actually, some of you guys know I have a friend. I was on the phone with her a couple of years ago, and she said, Paige, when I first met you, and she first met me when I was maybe 2-3 years sober, she said that, Paige, you were the most negative and self-deprecating person that I had ever met. That's me. And the takeaway from that is I win. So if you're like, I'm the most negative and self-deprecating, I win, right? And so for me to be able to say everything good in me is God, when somebody's compliment, that's not me. And that is a practical example of that noetic experience. The third is that it is transient. The experience itself is transient. It will come and it will go, but the effects of it remain. And in varieties of religious experience, he talks about how people who have had spiritual experiences they don't have, there might be some backsliding in behavior, but they don't doubt that there could be a power greater than themselves. That just, it's you don't, because it's like you can see how that power has worked in your life. And passivity. The fourth quality that he noticed was passivity. And what that means is I don't show up and say, that's it, I'm having a spiritual experience. I can't control its coming and I can't control its going. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, we have a way to create it, to create the fertile soil where it happens. It happens to us. And that's how William James defined it. Now, there's this wonderful spiritual teacher of the same time. Her name was Evelyn Underhill, and she actually had spiritual. She was on the spiritual journey, and she was like, no. She had these other characteristics of a spiritual experience. But that's why it's so helpful to see these different descriptions, because it might look a little different, but we can see some common parallels in all of these descriptions. So, most of us think this awareness of a capital P power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness, that with knowing. And it says most emphatically, again with emphasis, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover. Now that's also a hill that I die on, that you can recover. Yes, you can recover. Dying on that hill, fight me about it. And I know some of you are like, girl, I thought you ceased fighting anything or anyone. That's a hill I'm dying on. All right. And actually, one of the third hill that I die on is sometimes we hear people say meditation didn't mean meditation in the 1930s. That's just not true. I know it's not true because in Varieties of Religious Experience, which is the only book that is directly quoted in the first 164 pages. There are books that are referenced and maybe borrowed from a little bit, but the only book quoted and pointed to, page 28, Varieties of Religious Experience. It talks about, now it doesn't talk about meditation, but it talks about a number of people who had meditative practices even in the Western tradition for years and years and years and years. So we can't say meditation doesn't mean meditation. It meant meditation. And actually, in more cases than not, prayer meant meditation. Prayer didn't mean prayer. Prayer meant meditation. So just, again, getting rid of those old ideas about meditation. So if you ever heard meditation didn't mean meditation, it just meant thinking. That doesn't seem to be true. Yeah, lecture 16 and 17, mysticism. Yeah. I can, after the meeting, because I don't have time to do it, to multitask that well, I can get you the exact page some of the stuff is on. But not while I'm doing it, because I can barely do one thing at once. Alrighty. So it says, most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated. So this is what can defeat me, by an attitude, my attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial, if I'm not even a little bit open to that there could be a power, and to take the actions to seek that power, that no, I don't have to do it. No, it couldn't work for me. That is the only thing that will hinder me. And it says, we found that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. No one. It's open to all of us. And it says, willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery. So we need these. They're essential. But these are indispensable. We can't go without them. We need them. We need them in buckets. It says, and this is a quote, it says, there is a principle, which is bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance, and that principle is contempt prior to investigation. So what it's saying is there's one principle that will keep me away from all information, that is the thing that no argument can penetrate, and will keep me in everlasting ignorance, that everlasting unknowing, not knowing this power. And that is contempt prior to investigation, being convinced of something before actually trying it. and then it says Herbert Spencer. But that is not a Herbert Spencer quote. It's not. It actually is a quote by, and it should be attributed to William Paley. He lived from 1743 to 1805, and he was an English clergyman, author, and lecturer. And that quote should be attributed to him. And you're like, how did they make that mistake? Well, there was there's an artist. His name was Ray C. And he designed, if you've ever seen the yellow and red dust cover for the first edition, he designed that. He also designed this Art Deco cover. And his story was in the first edition, and it was called An Artist's Concept. And it started with this misquote in it that was wrongly attributed. And when his story was taken out, they liked the quote, so they kept it and didn't do the fact checking. And that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes in Alcoholics Anonymous. But do you know Herbert Spencer? He is regularly quoted in Varieties of Religious Experience. So with that, I will wrap it up and turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Paige.